Live Radio and Independence Live. So that means, yep. So welcome to Independence Live and Indie Live Radio. We're here for the next hour, and it's good to be back with Graham because I've been off for a few weeks. So good to see you again, Graham. How's it going?
I'm good, mate. It's good to have you back. I feel I've missed you for the last couple of weeks I've been doing this.
Yeah. I feel as though I want to give you a hug, but it would be a miracle if we can do that over the computer. We're only here for an hour, sadly. But until the football season kicks off, we'll be back until 5 till 7. So it's me, Mike McCune, and Graham Duffy tonight until 6 o'clock. You can comment on anything we say below, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook as well. And we're going to be speaking tonight about Wimbledon because at the moment there's a game on. Cameron Norrie's on court against Djokovic. We'll bring you up to speed on that in a few minutes' time. Rugby and the Scottish Open, believe it or not, is happening this weekend as well. Don't forget you can comment on anything, as I say, on the comment section, or you can get us on the old Twitter because Graham's loves Twitter nowadays. It is the Locker Room Indie Live, and sorry, say that again. Locker Room Indie Live on Twitter as well. Get us on there, and the comments are there. Okay, Graham. Before we move on to speak about the Wimbledon, let's have a wee quick word about your beloved Hearts, because you told me today that you're going tomorrow to see them playing Bonnie Rig Rose, and I don't know if you got my joke in the chat. I was putting like the Rose might break hearts, so I don't know. So sorry if that's a bad joke to kick off the show, but it can only go downhill from here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I've not been at Tynecastle for a while now, so it'll be good to get back and see it's only a friendly, but I want to see how Bonnyrigg are going to do. Obviously, they're preparing for life in League Two, and they've also got some Premier Sports Cup games to play, and they're playing Hibs actually in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to be like against Hearts. In terms of Hearts, we've signed a few players in the summer. We've still got a bit more business to do. I think we're really needing at least another couple of strikers because we've only really got Liam Boyce and Ewan Henderson. So we are hopefully going to get these couple of strikers in. I know Robbie Nielsen said yesterday he's not panicking. I feel like Captain Manor now. Don't panic. But, I mean, I think the squad is looking decent going ahead to the new season. I'm looking forward to the start of the new season in a few weeks' time. And hopefully, we'll have a good season. I can't wait for the European draw on the 2nd of August to see who we're going to get. I think I have to be honest and say we'll probably be in the Conference League group stage, which I'm fine with that. I don't mind that at all. But yeah, I'm looking forward to back at Tynecastle tomorrow and hopefully get a decent crowd along. So yeah, I can't wait to get back along to Tynecastle again.
And speaking about Hearts and Hibs, you were telling me about a charity game. It's coming up in a few weeks' time.
It's actually tomorrow. So one of my good friends, Russell, is a massive Jambo like myself, and he has brilliantly organised this game. So it's Hearts fans and Hearts legends against Hibs fans and Hibs legends. I don't know if I've actually got any, but let's not go there. And that's no tomorrow. Comment. And that's tomorrow at 3:00. It was initially going to be on the Oriam outdoor pitch, but it's now going to be indoors. So it's 3:00 at the Oriam. This is to raise money for Prestonfield Day Centre and all the work that they do. It's a brilliant organisation, and I spoke to Russell earlier. The guys are all looking forward to it. The Jambos are all looking forward to it. And it should be a great day. So if you're at a loose end tomorrow, get along to the Oriam, support the boys. I think the stand at the Oriam holds about 600. So hopefully that'll be a sellout. And yeah, it'll be great to, for the guys to get along and see the two guys giving their all. And hopefully the Jambos come out on top. Come on, the Jambos!
Hey. And don't forget, we'll mention that before the end of the show as well, because Berwick Gaelic charities as well. So if it's a nice day tomorrow, get along to the game. So as I say, the football season kicks off in a few weeks. The Premier Sports Cup has started. I don't follow that during the summer because I don't know about you, Glenn, but there's too many sporting events on during the summer and you lose track and stuff. So let's go on to Wimbledon then, Cameron Norrie. Before we go on to speak about the game, he's currently on centre court against Djokovic. I've never heard of the guy before. By the way, that's a joke, just in case you say, what you talking about, Michael? It's been about 4 years. Big achievement for him to get to not only the semi-finals, but the quarterfinals as well, Graham.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think even in Norrie's wildest dreams he would have thought about this before the start of Wimbledon. You know, he's 26-year-old. This is the furthest he's ever got. It's a brilliant achievement. And I actually started watching the game before I came on here tonight, and he won the first set in like half an hour. He was doing really, really well. But, I mean, to be honest, Djokovic was going to come back at some point, and he has. He took the first set, he took the second set, and I think he's winning the third set now as well.
He's actually just won it, Graham.
Has he? Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Cameron Norrie, this is an amazing achievement. You know, as I say, this is the furthest he's got. He's been brilliant. Obviously, the 5 sets against David Goffin in the quarterfinal, he came through that. And to have got to a semi-final against a guy like Djokovic, who's just an absolute machine, and to take the first set, as I say, beyond his wildest dreams. And listen, if he does bow out, which it is looking likely, it's been a remarkable achievement, and he can be very proud of what he's done so far because it's been brilliant.
Yeah, so I've got to correct myself. He's 7 for the set, so he's 5-2 up on the third set. Just gone love 15 to Norrie as well. He's up against. Good afternoon, Mr. Ferguson.
Apologies, gentlemen, for being a little bit late in joining you, but the intricacies of StreamYard were foiling me today on my browser. So good to join you.
I thought you were getting your makeup on there, David, because it takes me about half an hour to get my makeup on, and it still doesn't work, you know. But yeah, good to see you again, David. Thanks for coming on. We are on till 6 o'clock tonight. As I say, it's just got an hour tonight instead of the 2-hour one because it's a cross season. And yeah, I was just speaking about Wimbledon there. I don't know if you've caught any of the game, David, but once it all, and Djokovic is up 5-2 in the third set, 7 for the set. So you could say, well, if this set goes 2-1, the game's a bogey, as they say in Scotland, David.
Yeah, probably. I mean, you've got to say, because of the quality of Djokovic, it's really nasty of him, I think, to allow Norrie to have that first set and get all the hopes up, wasn't it? And thinking this could be it. According to his coach and trainers, Norrie's one of the fittest guys on the circuit. He can go 5 sets, no problem. I don't think that's a problem for him in having the fitness to take Djokovic to 5 sets, but being able to match the quality, Djokovic looks like, from what I've seen of it, not playing with him, but he's playing within himself and being able to do the right things at the right time and just making it really difficult for Norrie. Yeah, but I caught what Graham was saying there, and yourself. I think it's a fantastic achievement for Norrie to get to where he is, get through. It's amazing how that crowd and that excitement, I think can carry players at Wimbledon, and playing in front, once you get the crowd behind you and how much they can take you through, because that's no mean feat, the results he's had, in the last 2 rounds. He had to play some really good tennis. So, yeah, I mean, it's great as well to be able to say that we can claim another Scotsman, isn't it? Just as Andy Murray is coming to the end of his career. I think South Africa, New Zealand, Wales also claiming Cameron Norrie for their own. But yeah, we'll have a piece of him too. I think it'd be great to see a player coming through, and the fact that he's focused. I think for a number of years he wasn't as focused on his tennis. It wasn't full-time professional for him the way it has been for Andy Murray and many others. So to think that he's only really been full-time professional for, I think it's 4 or 5 years, and he's getting to that level now, I think that's fantastic. I think, hopefully we've got a few more years, hopefully to see him come through and cause a bit of damage.
Djokovic, while you were speaking there, David, Djokovic has just took the third set now, 2 sets to 1. So you would say that's the game kind of over. But don't count your don't count your chickens too much, because we saw it coming back before, but we saw it coming back before. But I think I think he's up against it now. I wanted to maybe touch upon. I don't know if David saw any of the game today. Alfie Stewart in the wheelchair tennis, and what I like about the game was they actually put the game on court one, so it was actually on one of the show courts as well, and that was kind of like good to see, because I'm trying to remember that the wheelchair tennis has never been on the kind of like main two courts before. It's always been court two or court five or whatever, but never court one. So that's good to see as well, David.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think it's tremendous, and I think Alfie is giving the crowd something. It's worth their money. Coming back from set down and looking like he was losing that second set. I think it was a 5-1 down in that second set, and he's come back and won it. So to get to the final. So,
okay.
I mean, he was so close to being all over for him after 2 sets there. So yeah, it's great. I mean, these guys are fantastic athletes, aren't they? They put as much into their sport as anyone else, potentially even more into their sport and their training to be able to get to that level. And but we've got to talk about inclusion properly, and you and I talk about it a lot, Michael, about clubs that talk about inclusion. They don't really mean it. They create perhaps a little disabled club or a little group of disabilities, and that's it. And then they say we're an inclusive club. Actually, it's got to go much further than that, and we have to be seeing people with disabilities involved in running clubs, on boards, coaching, and it does help if you see them. You get some inspirational people on television and radio. I was talking to somebody just last week about how my daughter, if you ask my daughter at the moment who she's looking forward to seeing in the Commonwealth Games, who she thinks the best athlete is, my youngest daughter will tell you she thinks it's Sammy Kinghorn. Now she doesn't make a distinction between any of the athletes. She doesn't say, although the best Paralympic athlete would be Sammy. She met Sammy. She came to her school when she was in primary school. She talked to the kids about her experience of having an accident, of being in a wheelchair. And just like anyone else coming to the school, any other sports, any other athlete, my daughter Liv has followed her since then and watches her all around the world. And so she is her number one athlete. And I think it's fantastic that we're starting to see now athletes with disabilities being given the same level of coverage and respect that they've deserved. They should have had all along. So they've had to push it and give themselves that platform and make the most of the platform when they get it. There's pressure on them to do that. But as you see with Alfie Hewitt today, he's certainly capable of doing that.
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak about the Commonwealth Games, David, but now that you kind of brought it up, and I don't know if Graham kind of knows this or anybody else, but the Commonwealth Games is totally different to like the Paralympics and stuff, because like the program is integrated with parasport. So in terms of like the Olympics, you get that for 2 weeks. And then you get the Para Games for 10 days or maybe more, David. But with the Commonwealth Games, they kind of merge it together. And I feel as though it's better for people to watch and kind of like understand. Whereas if the Paralympics is on their own, people actually goes away and forgets about it, because there's always like 2 weeks in between like the Olympic Games and the Paralympics as well.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, and you speak to the athletes. I know Sammy Kinghorn interviewing her as well in Glasgow in 2014. they felt it was much better for them, and it was a great experience for them to be mixed and to be able to get crowds, obviously. And it's an educational thing. People can say in the past they might have said, they might have said they wanted to watch people with disabilities involved in athletics, but they didn't really mean it. They might have thought the tickets shouldn't be priced the same. It's like watching women's sport. People in the past would say, I won't pay as much for that, or it's not as attractive. And then they go and watch it, and it's just got the same attraction as watching anybody else competing, sometimes even more, because you've got an understanding of them having to push their body even further than some other people to be able to compete at international level. And so the attraction's the same. It's just educating people that. So you have to be able to put it on in front of people for them to learn that there's just the same amount of excitement, in the stadium when there's a para athlete competing as there is when there's when somebody competing in the Commonwealth or the main Olympics or the standard Olympics, whatever. But it's, if you don't put it on in front of people, then people don't realise that and don't get the chance to experience that. So that's why it's important that we see it on that stage. It is mixed. It's funny, I was looking at something about women's sport the other day, and I was reading a book called All to Play For, which is a great book, written by Matt Rogan, which talks about how women's football in the 1920s was attracting crowds of 50,000 people. They had a record. Man City then, I think it was, women then had a record 55,000 who were coming in to watch, and that actually produced a response from the men's FA or the FA to shut women's football down, because they were worried it was going to take crowds away from the men's game when the men came back from the war, what have you. And so they did shut women's football down for a lot of years. But actually, they had 50,000 people coming to watch women's football at the early part of the 21st century. And that's the challenge. It's not people don't want to watch different people, whether it's women, girls, non-male sport, or they don't want to watch people with disabilities. It's having a chance to do that. So I'm delighted the broadcaster of Wimbledon have given Alfie that platform today, and the broadcasters are starting to understand, starting to realise that people want to watch athletics in all shapes and forms.
I think the women's Euros opening game, the England game the other day, had about 60,000, which is the biggest crowd for a women's football game, which is absolutely fantastic, to be honest.
But Graham, do you know when they were starting that? They were looking at figures and saying we're going to have a record. If we beat 50,000, we'll get a record figure, which was nonsense, because they were ignoring what I've just discovered in reading this book that has been written for that purpose. Matt's book came out just last year. He wrote it to show that things have happened before. This isn't brand new. So, broadcasters were saying, look at this, we've got 60,000 watching women's football. How far have we come in the last 10, 20 years? Not realising that actually it's nonsense, that, people were watching that 100 years ago. So, it's interesting, but it's rewriting history a little bit in the suggestion that people are only starting to watch women's football and women's sport.
I was just going to say a big shout out to our colleagues at BT Sport, because I don't know if you know, guys, but BT Sport had the Disability Football Cup this year. They had it last year as well. It's at George's Park in England. So you had like cerebral palsy football, you had like blind and partially sighted football. But David right, it's like a kind of education for people outside the kind of disability bubble, you would call it. So well done for BT Sport. Go back to Wimbledon. Obviously, we forgot to speak about Gordon Riggs. He's beaten the singles by Alfie Stewart as doubles partner, and I think they're on court today as well. And the men's and the wheelchair doubles, and Andy Murray as well. We need to speak about him. Good to see him, but still plagued by that injury, Graham. So, what's your thoughts on Mr. Murray before we get on to the Gordon Reid?
I mean, it's disappointing because I like Andy Murray. I think he's a brilliant competitor, but it's just that injury has really held him back. I mean, it's great that he competed in Wimbledon this year, but that injury is it's taken so much out of him, and he's just. I said this on the show a while ago that I don't think he'll ever get back to the form that he is capable of. And listen, he's getting older. The injuries haven't really helped. But the fact he was able to compete this year was great. But I just don't think he's ever going to go back to that form again. I'd love to see it, but I just don't think it's going to happen anymore. And now you look at a guy like Cameron Norrie, who, you know, he's a semi-final, is a fantastic achievement for him. But I just think Andy Murray, I feel sorry for him because he has been a brilliant, brilliant competitor. You know, when he first won Wimbledon, it was absolutely fantastic achievement. You know, for a Scottish guy to do that after however many years it was brilliant. But it's just, he's never going to hit that form again. But if he can play, I mean, he's not even that old, but it's just that injury's just held him back for so long.
Yeah. Do you think he should continue, Graham? I mean, it's only a question for him. You know, we can't answer that. He's the one who's got me to decide. But it's interesting watching players and deciding when the right time is to go. You know, and you see it with footballers, don't you? See it with rugby players, and often for players, I think, or athletes at Andy's level, they tend to think the right time is to go when they can't win anymore. Now, I'd agree with you. I think Andy's chances of winning, you know, must be really slim now. But to get that body, you know, he's not young. You're saying he's not old, but he's 35, 36, I think he's 35. That, you know, it's going to take some effort. Now, we saw Rafa Nadal, you know, the struggles Rafa's had to get through. And, you know, these injuries that are popping up now, those of us who are of a certain age, we know that the injuries they come easier, you know, and they take longer to shift. Because you've done that damage to your body, it's never going to be the same again. So, you know, Rafa was trying to hold together abdominal muscles that have torn. You know, I would suggest he's, you know, and I'm not an expert, of course, but, you know, they're never going to be the same again. Doesn't matter how much effort he puts into it. And he's been reconstructed, you know, the hips been done, and there was an element there, a suggestion I think last week, that he feels he can be better than he was in the year or two before it. But you know, when you get to 35, I think you've got to have an awful lot of things going your way and being right for you to be able to work your way through a whole tournament against boys that are up and coming guys in their late teens, early 20s. So I just wonder whether Andy knows himself when the right time is to call it quits, and whether he can go out, you know, whether he'll go out with his head held high, which I think he still would do now. But if he was to be in a circuit for another couple of years and lose regularly, I would hate to think, like you, Graham, that younger people watching would just think he's an average player, or he's just, you know, because they wouldn't remember the great moments from him that we remember, the US Open and the Olympics and Wimbledon, and they would start to think, oh, he's just a bit of an old has-been, as opposed to him going out and maybe that's what he was looking for. Maybe he thought he had one last chance, and you know, he wants to pull it off in one of these big tournaments. Maybe he thinks he's got a chance.
I was actually laughing here the other night. I had I went out the house and I missed the Nadal game, David. But apparently, when he was fighting back, and obviously he won the game, his box weren't over impressed with him, because every time he was looking at his box, his dad and his physio wasn't cheering, because they knew that he was actually pushing himself too much. And obviously it paid off, because he's not in the semi-final now. But I suppose it's like any other sport, like football, or especially individual sports like tennis, football, tennis, golf, and I was going to say snooker, but it's quite hard to get an injury if you're lifting pints all night in a pub. But like, you know, not that I'm saying snooker players drink a hell of a lot, you know, one or two I've heard. But it must be quite difficult to, you know, if you're playing a sport for many years and like you've got a bad injury. Just using an example like Andy Murray, played all the sport for years, and he gets pulled up with an injury. Surely it's quite difficult to say, like, enough's enough.
I remember years back listening to a podcast, and now I'm not a massive cricket fan, right? But my son started playing it now, so I kind of have to be. But I remember listening to a podcast a while ago with Freddie Flintoff, who I actually quite like. And he was asked about retirement. And he basically said that retirement was the hardest thing he had to do, because he was like, I still feel I can play cricket, even though he had an injury. And he's like, I don't know what to do with myself now. I'm a cricketer. That's all I know. That's all I've ever done. And he kept saying that he kept having these images that he could still play cricket at the highest level, even though he knew that he couldn't. And I think that might be the same for Andy Murray. It's like, I want to keep competing, but I know that I'm never going to go back to that level again. So it must be hard for any sportsman to think, right, what do I do once I retire? And it'll be the same for Andy Murray. You know, he's only 35. He's probably thinking, I can go another few years, but that injury has held him back. So I think retirement for a professional, whatever you do, football, snooker, cricket, whatever, it must be really, really tough. I just listened to that Freddie Flintoff interview. It was interesting to hear the way that he was kind of thinking. I mean, he now coaches his laddie and stuff, and he's thinking, I can do the coaching side of it, but I just keep thinking all I want to do is play cricket again. But he can't. It must be really difficult.
Yeah, I think you're right, because they put so much into it, and players that have got to that level, Andy's level, you know, he's been doing that since he was 8, 9, 10, 11, hasn't he? And, you know, his identity is all wrapped up. His whole sense of being is wrapped up in the tennis player. So I know, I mean, I've interviewed lots of different players when they've come towards the end of their career, and they do say it's really difficult. And a number really struggle. And we've seen serious mental health problems with a number of athletes because they've finished their career and there hasn't been the support for them in terms of how they do other. I remember one rugby player saying to me, he wouldn't ever compare it necessarily to being in the army, but he said there are things similar where you're given kit. You know, you sign up the first day of the new season, you're told what to wear, you're told what to eat, you're told where to be, when. You're given out, you know, your passport's taken off you and only handed to you when you go through check-in, but it's kept by managers who hold it. All these things. He says, and suddenly you're turfed out of that and you've got to find a way with none of that support anymore. And it's not easy. And, you know, a number of them have a real problem with that. I think there's support, and a better support now than there has been in the past, better recognition of that. But you're right, it must be really difficult for Andy and that's, you know, we're not underestimating that. Understanding what he does next and where he goes next and where he finds purpose. It's not a matter of just putting his feet up. The type of person that Andy is, he's a driven individual. You know, he wants to make a mark. He wants to do something. So that's not going to be easy, finding out what that's going to be that comes next, and how he maintains that sort of passion he's got, where he directs it. Pretty sure the children that he's got will, as you know, Graham, they will make sure your day's mapped out for you often before you even start to think about what you want to do, and that'll help there. But yeah, I know. I mean, everybody knows, and I think for sports people and athletes who have got to that level, we can only imagine how difficult it is when you know that when you call time, you're not going back there. You know, all that, you know, adulation and all that, feeling you're getting things right and that challenging yourself. It's not coming back. You know, it's all behind you, and that must be really tough. But one of the things I just worry about is that you make that call. You know, you don't want to make that call too early, but you don't want them to make it too late. And the other thing you mentioned earlier, Michael, about injuries, I think, you know, you just hope he's got really good advice, because you don't want, you know, him to be bent double in his 40s because he's pushed on through these injuries and he's damaged his hip or his knees or his ankles to such an extent that, you know, he's not going to be able to recover from them. You just hope that's not going to be the case.
By the way, just to let you know, a quick update, 3-1 now to Djokovic. So, Graham, I told you before we came on now, didn't you? I put on a bet with you. I said, by the time we finish this show tonight, the game will be over. Hopefully I'm not eating humble pie by that time, but I doubt it. But, sorry, Graham.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's why some ex-professional footballers become pundits, because they just love football that much, and because they can't play anymore, they think, right, what can I do now? So they end up becoming pundits. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. But I think that's why these guys do that. So it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Tim Henman is a pundit. It wouldn't surprise me if that's the kind of route Andy Murray goes down. Or, you know, he could get into coaching. He could coach Lanyardis. He could coach other professional players. So, I mean, it's a route that he could go down. But I think once you retire, it must be, as a sports person, it must be really difficult, because the one thing you've always known is that sport. So to have to give that up, it must be difficult.
I tell you, it'd be interesting. Andy, can you imagine Andy Murray as a pundit? I mean, it could be the John McEnroe type, couldn't he? I mean, but he's got one of the challenges. I remember working with players, you know, when I was at Scotsman and else and BBC and doing things, and then there was a number of players who were great. They would help you all the time, no problem. They'd do interviews. They never wanted to do them. They were always a bit of an extra, but they would. Some of them were great, and you had no problems. Others couldn't wait to get rid of you. They couldn't wait to tell you that you were a nuisance and a pain. They didn't want to do interviews. When they did do interviews, they tried to get away with saying as little as possible. There was no way they were going to help you have something to write. And what I found interesting was the number of those guys who came at the end of their career and then came back to me saying, can you help me get a career in the media? Could you help me write a column, or could I get a bit on the radio show? And I would say, well, you know, you've made no effort to help the media for the last 10 years. You've told us what you think of us. Why would you want to work in the media? And it's because they can't see anything else. You're right, Graham. They think that's all that's maybe open to them, and they think it's an easy, cushy number. Just turn up and speak. You don't see all the research and all the rest that Michael puts into putting his shows together. You know,
you've met Michael, right? I've seen Pedro to say that.
But you know, so it's interesting. What kind of pundit would Andy Murray be? You know, I could see him certainly having honest comments. How long would he last? Starting making comments about other players when he's having to be honest and talk about players and what's going on. I think he's a great guy to talk to, Andy, and I think he has some fantastic comments. I think it would be great to have him on in the media, contributing, because his insight into the game is brilliant. But I have my doubts. I have my doubts he would want to do that, or he would take to that, to be honest.
When Graham suggested that about Andy Murray, I was just picturing on a certain radio station Andy Murray and Willie Miller commentating on the same game. That would be very funny. There would be millions of jokes then.
I think I'd turn that off, to be honest.
I think so. So we'll give Logie. I think even Judy Murray might turn off then.
Get the third Murray brother on. He could be entertaining.
Yeah, Jamie. Yeah.
No, I'm the other one, the comedian. Have you not seen that? The third Murray
comedian.
Brother?
No.
Have you not seen that?
No.
Have you seen that, Graham? No. Judy Murray is appearing in the Fringe this year with the third Murray brother, the one who's rubbish at tennis. And he's done, I need to check what the boy's name is, but he's on, he appears in Scot Squad. He's a comedian, and he appears in Scot Squad. And he came up with the idea a few years ago of this little sketch. During COVID, I think, he came up with this little sketch. In fact, it must have been before then, because he went and filmed it with her, where he was the third Murray brother. And he was useless at tennis, useless at sport. And so nobody talked about him. So his mum never talked about him. And you've got to see it, because it's Judy Murray agreed to go along with it, and so she did a sketch where he's sitting there. She's been interviewed by the BBC about the third Murray brother. Why do you not speak about him? And she just says he's rubbish. Why would you speak about him? It's just he's hopeless. He's an embarrassment to the family. And you see him out in the tennis court trying to hit tennis balls, and they're going all over. It's very funny, and it's got such a following now. I think that's why they've put on two sold out Fringe shows with Judy Murray and this chap, I need to check his name, who, you know, where he's playing the part, and it's very funny to watch.
It's a shame it's not Al Murray, the pub landlord, playing tennis while drunk.
Yeah, that'd be another. Yeah, I'm just looking. What's his name? They call him Duncan, so he's called Duncan Murray. In the thing, Chris Forbes is his name. There you go. He's the actor who's in Scot Squad, and he came up with it. Duncan Murray, the third Murray brother that nobody talks about. Yeah, it's quite funny. Imagine being born into that family if you weren't and you weren't good at tennis. Yeah, that'd be a challenge, wouldn't it? But he would be entertaining to have on the media, that's for sure.
Yeah. So one man we never spoke about there was Gordon David, and as I say, it's just typical. He get knocked out in the quarterfinal with his teammate Alfie Stewart. But there actually, Alfie Stewart must be absolute shattered, because he just finished his game for an hour ago, I think, and he's back on court and a few others as well, playing is it the semi-finals he's playing tonight with Gordon Reid. And again, that's in court one, that game, so that's good to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's, sorry, I thought you were coming in there, Graham. But yeah, I mean, it is good to see. I think it was disappointing actually that he was drawn, that Gordon Reid was drawn with Alfie. You know, I thought that was a bit strange. Now, I don't know enough about the seeding at Wimbledon this year, but you certainly would never get Djokovic and Andy Murray paired together in the first or second round, would you? At Wimbledon. So why, I think Alfie's maybe number 2 seed, I think, and
I think it's
Gordon
because
maybe 4.
I think it's because wheelchair tennis, they don't play first round, second round, third round, fourth round. I think they just come in at the quarterfinal stage, David, because I'm sure that the wheelchair tennis started on first. So yesterday, and it finishes on Sunday. So that must say to me that they've got so little in the tennis kind of like circuit. Yeah. They're still trying to build the game up, if you know what I mean. So maybe that's why they're kind of paired together. But yeah, you're right. I mean, every single year it's either been a final or a quarter-final. They've always been together. It's a bit unlucky, I suppose, but that's the way it goes. Yeah, still 3-1 to Djokovic in that game, and Norrie 7. It's juicing in that game, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Until we go off here at 6 o'clock. Don't forget, you can watch us, you lucky people, on Independence Live, and you can listen to us on Indie Live Radio. I've been put off there actually because Norrie has just served. I might be eating humble pie. It's a long way back, but it's 3-2 in the third set to Djokovic. So all to play for, and that humble pie tastes nice as well. But yeah, so you can comment on anything that we're talking about, because we're talking nonsense. Well, I'm talking nonsense anyway. I've made a career out of it. It is the Locker Room Indie on Twitter as well. Let's break away from tennis for now, David, and let's speak about your rugby, man. So let's speak about rugby. Scotland are playing tomorrow against Argentina at 8:10 kickoff. I don't know if it's on the TV anywhere, that game, but it's over in Argentina. And we'll come back to speak about Hamish Watson winning his 50th cap for his country tomorrow night. But disappointing, Graham, David, sorry, last week, Scotland lost 28-18 in the opening game last weekend.
26-18, yeah. It was. I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I've covered these tours before. Unfortunately, I was in Argentina. I think for our first test tours in 2000, first in a long time, 2010, 11, and we won there. We won the tours, but it was really tight. The games were tight. They were really difficult. The Pumas in front of their own crowd. They've got fantastic rugby crowds there in Argentina, and they're just as passionate as a football crowd. You know what the crowds of the Boca Juniors or River Plate are like. They might not be quite the same penned in against the fences in quite the same way, but it's not far off. They've got big fences up all around the ground, and the fans go right to the front and they're shaking the fences and shouting. It's not your typical rugby match, that's for sure. And some of these young Scotland players won't have experienced that before. But it's, for Scotland, they're obviously, Finn Russell's not there, Stuart Hogg's not there. I think we know with Finn Russell, and we've known that really since he came on the scene, that he's a special player. He can do things. He's got a confidence level and a skill set that is far above any other standoff we've got access to, but also most standoffs in the world. You put his confidence and desire to have a go and take risks and not worry about making mistakes, along with the skill set he's got. It makes him one of the best rugby players in the world. And when you take that out of the team, there's no doubt the team's going to suffer. Blair Kinghorn is still finding his way as a standoff. He's had a fantastic season with Edinburgh. I can see why Gregor's picked him, given him the chance. He's stuck with him again this week. I think some people thought he might drop him. That's a difficult one. He's wanting to find out whether he's got the mettle and the quality to be a World Cup contender. Finn Russell doesn't have any real challengers. So, Adam Hastings has slipped out of the scene a little with injuries and what have you. We know Adam's a really good player, but he's not at the level of Finn Russell at the moment, being able to control a game. Gregor's trying to find out if Blair is, and I think this is a big test for him tomorrow. I think if he doesn't do well in this game, I think it could be we could see Blair Kinghorn potentially going back to fullback because of the challenges Gregor's got with trying to find standoffs. He's got to find players who can come in and take the place of Finn Russell if Finn's injured or not available. And there's a great chance. I mean, Argentina, don't underestimate them. The quality in that team, Michael. These boys are playing all over Europe and some of the best teams in Europe, and they're playing highest levels in Heineken Cup. And when they come together to play for their country, there's an incredible passion about them to want to pull on that jersey. Bizarrely, it's a picture of a jaguar that they've got on their jersey, and they call themselves the Pumas. I've never quite got to the bottom of that. There's some historic story about why they call themselves the Pumas, and they're actually jaguars is their emblem. But when they pull that jaguar or whatever on, they can become like men possessed playing in front of their own crowds. And so you really have to go toe to toe for a full game with them and not make mistakes. The discipline has to be bang on. You get wound up by these Argentinian players all over the place. And you've got to be really accurate. And that's what Scotland found last week, that they weren't accurate. They were off the pace early on. They were a bit sloppy with some of the things they did, and you just can't afford that at test level. So it's a learning experience for a number of younger players that are in the team, key positions. Gregor's made a few changes this week. He's dropped Ali Price, who's a wee bit slow last week in some of his supply, some of his service. He's given, another player a chance to come in and prove his worth. And he's made a change in second row, which is interesting. I think we had two second rows that were quite similar last week. So he's going for something a wee bit more of a mix. And, you're starting to look to World Cup, time, which is not that far away, and start to look at what players you've got, what depth you've got there. So that's what this tour is about, really, is exposing players to that kind of ferocity in Argentina and see who can handle it. But I think it'll be really tight again tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if we did win it and we were able to do it, because I think Argentina will have a little bit of complacency perhaps from last week. Won't do us any harm. We used to say that if you had to win the first two tests in a tour because you struggled after that because the team would gel at home. But actually, I think they were that much in command last week, the Argentinians, until latterly, and until the second half, we scored 2 tries. They came back very quick. That I think they'll be quite confident, the Argentinians. And if Scotland can put their game together, I think they could surprise them.
Now, Graham, you mentioned getting on about it's hard for people to give up the game like Andy Murray and whatever, but Hamish Watson is winning his 50th cap for Scotland. That's some achievement, Graham.
100% it is, and he thoroughly, he's been fantastic for Scotland, and to get your 50th cap is a brilliant achievement. I fully expect Scotland to be a lot better tomorrow than they were last week. I thought Scotland were quite a bit off for last week. Whether we were surprised by Argentina's start, I don't know. Whether we're surprised by the crowd, I don't know, but they just seemed really miles off it last week. But I think they'll be a lot better tomorrow. I read a stat after the game, actually, that Scotland have lost 4 of the last 6 test matches against Tier 1 opponents in 2022, which is slightly disappointing. But, listen, Scotland, I think we can play a lot better, and I think we will do tomorrow. But as David said, it'll be a difficult game, and it probably will be tight. But we've got to start a lot better than last week. It was a really poor start last week.
Yeah, that's the key. And I think, it's all lessons, and it's horrible to talk about lessons and boys learning in international rugby because you think they're going to be fully shaped and they've got those lessons to pull on the jersey. But unfortunately, that's not the way it is in Scotland. And you see that with the Scotland under-20s. They've just been stuffed, absolutely stuffed by teams in their under-20 championship. We're getting relegated now out of the main competition in the trophy. And not just beaten, but beaten by 50 points by Georgia. That's an indication of a problem we've had in Scottish rugby for 20 years. Since the game was professional, we have not managed to sort out that development of players from 14, 15 up. We can identify talent, but we're losing players, we're hemorrhaging players, from the game and the club game. And as a result, you don't have the same levels of competition coming through the ranks. So you're identifying players, but by the time our players get to 2021, 22, if they're playing every week for Edinburgh and Glasgow, which very few are, because we bring in foreigners to fill the gaps there and we rotate them. But if they are getting a chance, that's only when they're starting to learn about these sorts of mistakes. What happens when you aren't quite on the money early on? And some of these boys are learning in international rugby. Whereas in England and France and elsewhere, they've been learning those lessons at 16, 17, 18, 19, because they've been playing a high level every week, week in, week out, against men where you soon suffer both physically and mentally if you get it wrong and you make mistakes. By the time they get to out of the academy system in England, by the time they get to 19, 20, 21, they're pretty well formed. Some of our boys are not at that stage, even at 24, 25, because we've got only 2 pro teams. They're not playing every week, and every week it's not the same high quality. And that's what we start to see happening when we go to Argentina. Graham, I think a lot of us were quite shocked. I wasn't, because I've seen it before, but I wasn't that shocked about that first half. But we were shocked that that team could fall off the pace or just not get on the pace quickly enough. You're right. I think we'll see it this week. But don't be surprised if we see other mistakes. Their accuracy is good. They get on the game, they get on the front foot, but they make other mistakes. Because unfortunately, this is where Scottish players learn, is in the full cauldron of international rugby, because they haven't been doing it in our domestic game week in, week out. Our domestic game does not prepare our players for that quality of rugby, sadly, at under 20 or at full senior level. I
just wanted to pick you up on the point there that you made, David, but straight back to Wimbledon now. Honest, I'm not sitting in a court. I'm watching it in home, as they say. It is 4-3 now to Djokovic. So the humble pie is halfway out the oven, but I'm shoving it back in. But I think I'm safe for this week. David, a couple of weeks ago, you were on the show speaking about the Scotland game. I can't remember when you were on. I think it was the last Scotland game you were on, and we were having the same conversation about the development of players coming through. So I just wanted to ask you, and maybe Glenn would be able to help me here as well. Do you think it's a kind of like society thing when we speak about when you were talking about rugby there? It kind of reminded me about the Scottish men's football team, that we've got nobody coming through. I think the ranks.
Sorry, Mike, I think we talked before about the simple fact, and one of the things that I'm involved in now in terms of sport research, which is where I work now with the Observatory for Sport in Scotland. One of the things that surprised me, and it's just a simple bit of research, simple bit of statistics that we don't see mentioned very often by Gregor Townsend or by others talking about the problems with sport, is that we have had a massive decline in people taking part in sport in Scotland over the last 20 years. And you only have to look at your own local clubs. And in the borders where I live, I'm from Paisley originally. I've lived in the west, the east, the north, the south. I lived in the south for quite a long time. And in borders, it was a bit of a microcosm of Scotland, in that every town had a strong rugby team, a football team, cricket team, hockey club for women. You'd then get athletics and summer swimming and other sports involved in most of the towns. But a lot of people see Hawick as being a big rugby town, of course. When I was reporting when I was a sports editor for the local newspaper in Hawick were putting out about 12 or 13 rugby teams, adult rugby teams, every Saturday. They were also putting out about 10 or 11 adult football teams every Saturday in a town of only 18,000 people. Now, they're now putting out about 3 or 4 adult rugby teams and the same number of football teams every week. That's a massive decline. Now, that's happening. That's been happening at youth level as well. So we have as many kids taking part up to age of 10, 11 as the most active countries in the world that are taking part in sport. From 11, 12 on, we have such a steep decline in Scotland of dropout from sport now that by the time we're in adulthood, we're among the bottom of the European tables for sport participation in adulthood. Now, that's going to affect an awful lot. It affects our health. We see more people with obesity problems because they're not engaged in any regular activity. but it also affects elite sport because it means the numbers competing every week to get into a team are not so great. I speak to managers of football clubs round about me and rugby, and they'll say to me, David, the standard is nothing like what it was when you were playing 20 years ago. You'd be really surprised. You're getting boys who wouldn't have got anywhere near the seconds or the thirds team now playing in the firsts, and they'll criticise them and say, their attitude's not great or they're not turning up. You say that's because they don't want to be playing at a high level every week necessarily, but because you've only got one team, they have to be. And we've got that happening all over Scotland. You've got where you used to have 5 or 6 teams that you're able to put out. So to get into that first team, you had to be pretty good. You had to be training every week. You had to be doing some of your training on your own, extra training. You had to be focused on improving your skills to get into that. You don't have to have that now to get into the first team. So the quality of players, that's replicated across Scotland. So to get in a Scotland under 15 team, a Scotland under 16 team, and an 18 team, it's not going to be as difficult as it was 20 years ago because you're not competing with as many players. So then you come out of the Scotland setup at the age of 18, 19, play against countries from abroad where it hasn't happened. So England hasn't lost that number of players. France haven't. There's been declines around the world, but they've found ways to address it. Then you're going to find yourself really out of your depth. And that's a problem that's not talked about enough, is that decline of just everybody playing sport in Scotland. And it starts from the age of 12, 13. And if we don't sort that, then the future is not going to change. You're going to be Celtic, Rangers and other teams, Scotland teams, rugby teams are going to be pulling in more foreigners to fill the gaps. And that only makes it worse because that means the good players we are developing are not getting opportunities and they're not getting a chance to play for teams to play every week. So when they do get put in a Scotland team, pull on the jersey, which should be the proudest moment of their life, they're not prepared for it. So that's my real concern.
I was going to say, David, when Glenn told me about his son taking up cricket, I was quite impressed. But from your point of view, it's very good because it's kind of what you would say is coming out of left field, if you know what I mean, or the left batting. Hagging the punt there when I say that, I'll bowled over, so they'll stop my jokes now. But it's not, you know what I'm saying. It's not your typical son going down the football route or the rugby route or whatever. It's cricket. It's something outside the bubble, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I didn't think he would actually go and play cricket, but he has actually quite enjoyed it. And he played in a tournament a couple of weeks ago, and he did really well. It's just really enjoying it, which is fine. I've always said that whatever he enjoys playing, then that's fine. But I think, I mean, I'm very much a football person, but I mean, I don't mind what he does as long as he enjoys it. But he plays football every Monday and Thursday, and he plays games on a Sunday. Now, obviously, I go and watch them training every time, and a lot of the things the coaches do are really good, but sometimes I kind of think, I mean, listen, I'm not a football coach, but there's some things I can see standing in the touchline that I think maybe that could be better. Like yesterday, they played a friendly. I mean, there used to be days where they were getting hammered every week, and the people they were playing against they were bigger. I mean, my lad is 10, but these people that were playing are a lot bigger and a lot stronger physically. I went to watch them yesterday playing a friendly game, and they were doing really well. They started to switch to an side now, so they got offsides, they got proper referees, but they played their friendly last night. And the first half, they were really good. They were 0-0, they were playing really well, competing. Second half, they got beat 5-1. And I kind of thought, as soon as he lost the first goal, the head dropped. And, I mean, it is difficult as a father standing at the side watching my laddie, and he did well. He would always say to him, every time he plays, all I want to do is compete. Just do your best, that's all I ask for. But I was watching the foot they were playing against. They were passing the ball from the back. They were building up. That doesn't really happen with a team that I'm watching. And I think that, for me, I was watching a few times yesterday where we got the ball at the back and they were panicking and just launched it long. It's just, listen, it's the way they're going to play. That's fine. But I want to see, if you're going to make a mistake, I don't mind them passing the ball for the back. Make a mistake, you make a mistake. You're building it. But just the players they're playing against are, for me, they seem to be coached a little bit better. I'm not saying the coaches at my laddie's team are bad. I just think the coaches at the other teams are a little bit more ahead. And that's the level you've got to compete against. But I've always said to my laddie, as long as you compete well, as long as you do your best, that's all I can ask for. And it's the same with cricket. If he does his best, I don't care. But if he's enjoying it, that's fine. But I just think the way that some of these teams that I'm watching play against my laddie's team is so far ahead of where we are right now.
I mean, yeah. The important thing is that he's playing, he's having fun, Graham. You know, I get upset when I hear coaches that are on the kids' backs and it all becomes very technical at the age of 10, 9, 10 years old. It's technical. You should be here. You're a left back. You play that position. That's all. You don't go anywhere else. That doesn't help, and I've just relaying their data around how many kids are dropping out. There are reasons why kids are dropping out. Kids want to play sport. It's not that they don't want to play, but the influence of some coaches, parents, and others round about them are pushing them out of sport. So people taking it too seriously, people putting, winning but ahead of fun. And we talk about winning. The number of parents that come to me when I'm coaching and they say, you don't really coach them how to win, should you not be coaching them a bit? And I say, look, I don't need to coach them to win. They want to win as soon as they cross the pitch, they cross the line, the white line, and on the pitch. Every child wants to win. What I'm helping them with is helping them understand how they improve and how they get better and how they enjoy the game. And if they enjoy the game, they're going to play better than when they don't enjoy it and they're turning up and they're being bawled at or whatever and they go into their shells. Losing 5-1, it depends in that game, what they were doing, and it suggests they were doing an awful lot of things right in the first half that maybe they weren't doing, or the other team changed what it was doing. Now, maybe that is good coaching by the other team. But, an awful lot of the coaches were reliant on volunteer coaches. We're reliant on people just putting their hands up and prepared to go along and help. There's not enough coaches. We've lost loads of volunteers in the last 10, 20 years as well, Graham. So we used to have an awful lot more volunteers involved in running teams and clubs. But as we've lost clubs, we've lost volunteers. So it's not easy to get coaches that, understand everything, can change teams, can change games, get it right all the time. That's not always easy. It's just trying to get your son, I think, and trying to get, the youngsters to start to take a bit of responsibility, to enjoy it themselves, to learn what's going on, to see how they can influence the game as they play. But, trying not to put too much pressure on them at the same time, and that's a challenge because we can't afford to lose them.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed standing in touchdown quite a lot that a lot of parents get a lot more involved than what I do. I don't really say anything. I just leave it to the coaches to say where they want the players to be. But I hear folk on the touchline, I hear parents on the touchline really, really criticising quite a lot. And it's like, that's not my job. I'm there to watch my laddie and try and do well. I don't say anything. I just leave it to the coaches to do. But a lot of parents are, they are very passionate and they kind of think that maybe their laddies are better than they are. But listen, that's up to the coaches to decide that.
It's disgraceful. I find it's really tough. I find it really difficult when you see parents. When I have parents around me, I have to say to them, you're going to jeopardise your son's involvement or your daughter's involvement if you go on like that. And you're making it hard for them because we learn as coaches, all the coaching courses we do and the child psychology and all the rest, that kids can only take, and it's not just kids, adults are the same, they can only take in 2 or 3 messages in a game. They can't take in more than that. So if you shout, you've got to be over here. No, you've got to be there. Chase him back. Get the ball. Get on top of that. They don't understand half of it. So they switch off and they end up switching off to voices they hear from adults. And they switch off to their parents first before anybody else. But they'll switch off to a coach's voice if they hear it too much. And it doesn't help them. It just confuses them. And then they associate playing a game with not understanding what they're supposed to do. All parents should be doing is just encouraging them and like you're doing, Graham, just give your best. You can't do any more than that. You can only be you. You can't be that player or that player. You're tall and what have you. You can't be the wee fast winger. Don't worry about that. You do what you can do. And you just improve every week. Improve your left foot, your right foot. Improve your control. Do that every week and you'll get better and better and enjoy it. But the parents, some of the parents you see, you wonder who they're watching. They're looking at their child and you think he's kind of leash. You should be turning left. You should be leaving that defender. You should be saying, geez, the boy's only whatever old, 8, 9, 10.
Sorry, we've just got a couple minutes left on the show.
Yeah.
Cameron Norrie is out of Wimbledon, and Djokovic won tonight. He's in another final. That is on Sunday. Brilliant conversation. Sorry, we've ran out of time to have it. We're only doing another show until the football season begins. So thanks for joining me tonight, Graham, and David Ferguson, and we'll be back next Friday on Indie Live Radio and Independence Live. If you're going to transmit, have a good weekend. And if you're not, well, just watch it in the house a bit like me. And we'll see you soon.